My next two questions, I actually am going to give them to you at the same time because I'm not sure which one is better for you to address first. I want to ask a question. I want you to introduce us to NFTs, but I also want, if you will, please tell us about how the digital art form is evolving, because I know that there's a lot of exciting things happening. I think the two kind of go hand in hand, but I'm going to pass it to you and let you tell me if I'm right or not.
Sure. So yeah, just as far as so now we get into sort of digital art, and if we go back to the painting. Vincent van Gogh painted, the Starry, Starry Night, and there's one copy of it, right? So there's one copy of that, and it has immense value because it's in physical form, and unless somebody makes a sort of a fake copy of that, in physical format, that's the original painting, and that's the one that's worth all the money. So if I have it, then you cannot have it. And if you have it, I cannot have it. So that's how art and all the laws and rules around art were until the digital format came along. There was sort of the next sort of step would be more like photography, which is, you can have the single, Ansel Adams photo that was the original, but then there could be some prints of that photo, and then they're labeled 1 through 10, and there can be these very controlled replications of the original, but they're very well documented, and it's in a physical format. Because if I have Ansel Adams photograph print number 3 of 10, you cannot have that also, unless so that's like very deterministic. And so once digital art came along, digital artists were constantly complaining because they could mostly only get paid work for hire. Because once their digital, whether it's a moving image or a song, an audio song, or a still digital image that's super remarkable, once it's out on the internet, right click and done. So it's the right click problem. We replicate everything. And so that's the world that many digital artists, especially like people who are doing special effects and film effects and all of that, they were very frustrated because they were able to do some incredible work, but they could only get paid per hour or for hire. And once their masterpiece was out on the internet, it might not even be attributable to them, much less financially valuable to them. So the NFT, which is the non-fungible token, the big trick actually came with the cryptocurrency Bitcoin. The trick that Bitcoin did was, we'll go back to the painting thing. Right now, if I have $1 and I want to give you $1, if it's literally the actual dollar, if I give you the dollar, then I no longer have the dollar, right? Well, of course, we went into the sort of digital transaction. Banks sort of became the clearinghouse for those transactions. So when I give you $1 via PayPal or something, lots of authoritarian, organizations structure it. So when I give you $1, in digital format, I no longer have the dollar, and it's documented that you have the dollar. But the trick that Bitcoin did was the ability for me to send you $1 via email or any other format, and then there's a network of consensus that guarantees that I no longer have the dollar and you have the dollar, or the Bitcoin. I no longer have the Bitcoin and you have the Bitcoin. It basically, you don't really need to get too much into the technology. The real trick was that there's a way to transact so that a digital item of any sort can be provable that it is a singular item, that and you can follow its trading or transaction from one person to person to person. So that's how, and that's because once money got into the data system, we realized we had to fix that problem. But now you take that same methodology of digitally protecting a digital file, and whether it's a .mov file or a .pdf file or a .jpeg file, and you can then protect it with this blockchain technology, which means that it can be a singular provable item that can be that I originate. If it's my photo that I originated, it proves that I owned it, and all of its transactions, if I sell it to you and then you sell it to someone else, it is trackable, traceable, authenticated, and non-hackable. And that's the trick of that.
Yeah, I mean, that is really amazing, and I can see how that could have application beyond the art world. I assume people are looking at that. I think from a scholarship standpoint, people write and they get cited all the time. And I know that there's ways to keep up with how many times an article is cited. But I don't know that it's exact like the NFTs would be. So it seems like the NFTs would have some broader application as well. I want to interject this story in. I'm sure you're familiar with it. When I was doing the research for today, I assume that almost anybody would come across this, but I came across the story of, and forgive me if I don't say it correctly, but Beeple, mm-hmm. and how the title of the article that I read, I think it was from New Yorker, and it says how Beeple crashed the art world. And I think one of the things that people probably latch on to, what's most bizarre, is Beeple selling one of his works for $69 million. And if I read the story correctly, NFTs were a big part of Beeple's story. I assume you're familiar with this. Could you, tell the audience a little bit more about this? And forgive me if you're not familiar with the story, but I just assume that you are.
Yeah, no, I'm super familiar with the story. And so Beeple is a perfect example of why the NFT is so important, because he was an artist, a digital artist who was doing work that was amazing people, and it was mostly work for hire. He would do special effects on film. He would do, create amazing magazine covers, mixing 3D visuals with 2D visuals, and mixing pictures of famous people combined, and he does lots of stuff with like Disney characters, and it's definitely seen as avant-garde and recombining very strange things. An important thing about him, before I get into the $69 million, is that a lot of his work is meme oriented. So the meme is sort of the cultural gene kind of idea. But that kind of art, while it might not be seen as fine art to some people, it is the art of the times, and it reflects on what is happening in our culture. So he did a lot of meme work. But so when that Christie's did the auction for his art piece, the art piece was called The First 5,000. So an important thing to note about Beeple and that piece of art was that was the first 5,000 days of him creating a piece of art every single day. And so I love that, because to me, artists think that they either have a muse that inspires them, or else they're uninspired and don't create great things. Well, actually, art takes practice, and a person who creates artwork for 5,000 days in a row. And so basically, the piece of art that was bought by Metacoven and Tubador, those were sort of these pseudonymous names that purchased this artwork. when you break it down to a person who's really the most influential artist of our time right now, or one of the most influential. And I did, at one point in time, I broke down the numbers of 5,000 pieces of artwork into $69 million. And I think it ended up that each piece of artwork was worth about $150,000 each. That's really not, that's not that much, honestly, you know? But it was a really big deal because that happened early in 2021, right when the NFTs were exploding, and Christie's auction house, you know, auctioned it. And these guys, Tubador and Metakoven, who've now been doxxed, but at that point in time, they were pseudonymous, and they bought this work, and they were collectors of as much digital art and NFT artwork as they could find because they saw the, you know, value of it.
So. Yeah, that's such an amazing story. What I also learned about Beeple that I think is important to your discipline of digital art was, you know, Beeple, if I get the story right, you know, comes from a really good art family, and Beeple himself was a really talented artist who chose to go into the digital art space because I read in that it gave him more, it helped foster his creativity to a higher level. So I think that's a really important part of the digital art story at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the tools that you have access to, I mean, you know, go back to just painting. I mean, painting, you can change the brush, you can change the paints, and you can change the surface. You know, I mean, of course, there's people continue to do amazing things, you know, because you can put paper on there and you can make it 3D, you know, and you can do, you know, you can do the splatter painting, you can do all kinds of stuff. But the, you know, access to the tools in the digital world are just infinite and are getting even more infinite at this point in time. So yeah, I think that story, I really appreciate the fact that the first, you know, really expensive NFT did go to a true artist, you know, in the sense that a person who spent a lot of time on the art and craft of what he was doing, and not just somebody, you know, again, if you would go back to photography, a person who just snaps a quick snapshot is very different than an Ansel Adams who spends days waiting for the right sunlight and the right, you know, snow formations, and, you know, sits out in the cold for a week before the photo is perfect.